Welcome back. We're now going to get some practice applying the rules for exponents to actual examples. So, first example, x cubed raised to the 7th power over x squared raised to the 8th power. Now, there's a certain temptation to start canceling x's, but notice these x's aren't free to interact with anything else in the expression because they're stuck inside parentheses. So I have to get rid of the parentheses before these x's up here can see the x's down there. And the way I get rid of the parentheses is by using rule, if you look up at the top of the page, that's going to be rule 2. That tells me what to do if I have a power raised to a power again. Okay, and that rule says I'm going to multiply the powers. So x to the 21st power, and down below, same idea, x to the 16th power. Now I can use rule, it's rule 5 that says if I have the same base above and below, and notice these guys are not trapped in parentheses anymore. So if I have the same base above and below, I combine them by taking the exponent on top and subtracting the exponent below. And I'll just remind you, that's happening in the numerator. There's an invisible one denominator that in my final answer I actually am going to leave invisible. My final answer is x to the 5th, because 21 minus 16 is 5. And this is a perfect example of why we want that rule about subtracting. I don't want to write out 21 factors of x and down here 16 factors of x and start crossing them out to find out that I have 5 left over. And I want to understand that the 21 up here, that the 16 down here all get canceled out, leaving me none. They cancel out 16 of these, leaving me 5. Okay, and if you want to write it that way, that's okay with me. Just don't get confused with canceling common factors. What you're doing here is you're subtracting the 16 from the 21. Okay, next example. Fraction raised to the 4th power. Before I go on and do what I'm going to do, I just want to mention something that I do mentally. I don't always remember to tell you guys, but I mentally always look at what's inside the parentheses and ask myself if I can simplify in there, because it'll make my life much easier if I do any simplifying in here that I can before I apply the exponent out here. But in this case, there's nothing I can do to simplify in there. So I'm going to go right to applying that 4 exponent. If you look at rule 4 at the top of the page, that says a fraction raised to a power, that in a fraction raised to a power, both the numerator and the denominator take the power. So both the numerator and the denominator are raised to the 4th power. Now, just working from the top down, in the numerator I have a product, right? I have -2 times x to the 5th. And this 4 applies to the whole thing, so each factor is going to get that exponent. That's rule 3 that says that. If you look up at rule 3, each factor gets the exponent. So now I'm going to have -2 to the 4th power times x to the 5th to the 4th power, and I'll just leave the denominator as it is for right now. Now, before we go on, I've deliberately made a mistake. I hope you spot my mistake. I'll give you a minute to think about it. I'll give you a hint. There's something missing. So, okay. So notice that the factor in the numerator over here is a -2, but I didn't use -2 as the base on the 4. Remember when we write stuff, when I write it this way, the base on the exponent is 2, and then you have a multiplication by -1. Just a quick reminder of, you don't need to write this down if you remember it, but -2 to the 4th power means do -1 times 2 to the 4th power. if I want to say that I'm doing the whole negative 2 to the fourth power, in other words, I want to say I have negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, I have to put the negative 2 in parentheses. So in this, writing it this way, the base on the exponent is negative 2. If I write it this way, the base is positive 2. It just then afterwards is multiplied by a negative 1. Okay, so what was missing here was parentheses on the negative 2, and good job if you spotted that. Again, the reason for that is that negative 2 is the factor that's getting the 4 power. Okay, negative 2 to the fourth power is positive 16. To simplify x to the fifth to the fourth, I use that power to a power rule, which is rule number 2, which says multiply the power. So I'll have x to the 20th, and similarly down below, the new power on the z is 4 times 4, or 16. Okay, and that's probably a good stopping point. So I'll stop there, and we'll come back and do some more examples.